So the idea for this particular episode came up from my visit to recently. And I don't really know where this podcast is going. I don't even know if this is going to be aired because I don't
know where this podcast is going, and I'm a guest on the podcast. I'm not even the show host.
Okay, good. So I'm happy that you're so optimistic about it.
I 100% believe in the mission, like 1,000%.
So what is the mission of this particular episode?
Right. So you're visiting me and you went to a milonga. And look at me speaking tango language and not dancing. I've been paying attention. And you come back from the milonga, which is the largest city in the United States, and you're just not impressed. And I'm like, oh, like it's almost like personal. Like I feel like we should have more to offer. Like, you know, millions of people live here. How could we not have like what do the kids say these days? Pop-in? Oh my God, this is terrible.
Pop-in.
It's tango speak, right?
Pop-in is not a tango speak, but it's very 1990s.
It's not tango speech. I'm trying to be somewhere, anyway, I'm just trying not to be 100 years old. But anyway, moving on. So the tango scene was a bit sad, not your words, but that's my interpretation. You come back and you're like, well, yeah, we didn't really
small. It was small. It was a small milonga, it was an off-beaten path milonga, which is understandable. So it wasn't like a huge thing.
I don't know. I guess it's, and I had other expectations, but then you launch into how the music was not up to par.
Yes, I did.
And
say that.
I immediately said, well, you should do a podcast about it. And you immediately said, no. And I'm like, my idea is an awesome idea. Why not?
Well, and I'll say why not. And I guess this is where we left off. Because I said, I'm sensitive to, I don't want to offend anybody. I know that organizers put in a lot of work into putting together these events. And I guess I felt nervous about, what if the organizer of that milonga hears the podcast and hears me criticizing it? And I guess I was sort of reluctant because I remember saying to you that it might cause a lot of conflict. Like people might argue and there might be like some sort of confrontation. I don't like that. I don't like confrontation, number one. To which you were like, oh, that's even more.
That's reason. Even better. There's so many more reasons to actually buckle up and do this thing. Yes.
But then I was like, I remember telling you, and I told this later to Alex, and he said it was a really great analogy. I was like, listen, I can either be a Stephen Colbert or I can be a Jerry Springer. And I don't want to be Jerry Springer. To which, again, you said even more that I should do it even more because I feel that way. So that's when I was like, all right, maybe she's right. Maybe I should just, bite down and face this fear of stepping on people's toes, perhaps. So yeah, so here we are. I'm willing to put it out there and see where this goes. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about the music of that night. What questions do you have as a non-tango dancer who's been inundated with tango information over the past number of years? What questions do you have about my opinion of the music?
Before I ask my questions, right, and as a former journalist, I have many.
Not former.
I want to point out.
You're still very much a journalist.
I don't know. Like,
you can't turn that off.
Does a doctor never become a not become a doctor if they're not like doctoring? I don't know. I think that your concern and maybe fear even of stepping on people's toes and criticizing someone who put a lot of work into an event, obviously, is well-founded. But I do also feel that as humans, right, we have to have the ability to grow. And growth is very difficult, growth is painful, and growth is important, right? So if you cannot take feedback, which, by the way, I've gotten lots of amazing feedback from being on TV for 20 years, you know, like from my hair's bad, from being fat, from being drunk, whatever.
Drunk? I need to
How
hear
are you
this.
going to know? Huh?
I said drunk? I need to hear this story.
Oh,
But
I think it was, yeah, it's another podcast, but essentially it was just a quick email from an anonymous viewer saying, you look rough today. Was it too much vodka last night or something like that? You know, someone very, very brave decided to speak up. But the reason to do this podcast and the reason to listen and the reason to engage in conversation is all of you invest so much time and energy and money into dancing. And so why not make it an experience that is amazing for everyone? And the way to make it amazing is to be open to feedback. And maybe people will say, well, you, Elizaveta, don't know all the right things and all the right music, and who made you the expert? Well, they're listening, and you're not an expert, and you've been doing it for a decade, and you've been overseas where the dance came from. And if they're unhappy with the feedback, they just don't have to listen to it, you know?
That's a
or
good point.
If they want to DJ, and they want to participate in this world, like that's very special, that's very yours, then why not make it a great experience for everyone? That's what the job of a DJ is, isn't it? Is to play music that people can dance to, no matter if it's tango or whatever.
Yeah.
So what makes great tango music? That's my question.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that, because as I was thinking about this episode, I was wondering how I was going to frame it and what to say, you know, about it, because ultimately it's very subjective. Like, what makes great music is very subjective. So obviously when a DJ plays a certain set, they're playing music that they feel is strong, that they enjoy. And the DJ at this particular Milonga was obviously very passionate about the music he was playing. He was really in tune with it. He was one of those DJs who doesn't dance, just listens. And there was a lot of heart put into his playlist. So there was obviously a lot of passion. And I did find out that it was his first time DJing at that Milonga. And, you know, it's like I'm really split, because on the one hand, I want to support and be like, yeah, great job, you DJ'd. And, you know, the organizer was really excited because she actually asked me at the end, you know, when I was leaving, she was like, what did you think? What you know, it's his first time DJ. I was like, yeah, great energy in there. You know, like I was
so proud of you.
Like I had to be sort of both encouraging but not really lie, because I don't want to lie.
But let me interrupt you for a second though and ask you, like, so you made a good interesting point that I was going to follow up on, which is the DJ was not a dancer. And
you know, I don't know. He probably is a dancer. He probably is a dancer, but he didn't dance during his set, which is like, there's two types of DJs. There's the DJ that's going to just sit there and play music, and they're like so focused on the dance floor, they don't do anything else. They barely get up to go to the bathroom. And then there's DJs who are going to like put the song on and then go dancing and dance with people. So there's like two types of DJs.
In your experience, is the better DJ the one who is a good dancer?
I don't know if I can really say that for certain, because it more has to do with the DJing personality. Like for example, even though I really admire DJs who can put on the song and just go dance, I want to be that kind of DJ. I'm frequently not that kind of DJ. Like once I start DJing, there's something that takes over that I'm like, it's too much of a bother. I need to like really be in it. I need to watch. There's something else, some sort of other activity that's taking place in the brain that is like too much to think about dancing. So so it depends. I don't know if there's like a clear correlation between the level of the DJ and their dancing during their set, you know.
Okay. Well, I'm going to take my first question back for a second, because I think there are other questions that need to be answered before we get to what makes, a good, like, what is the best music for DJing. I remember talking to you years ago when you were getting ready to DJ for the first time. And
it was a long time ago.
See,
you remember that conversation?
Because you were so nervous. You were so nervous. And generally, like, through watching you through your like tango journey and your yoga journey before that, like, you typically are not rattled by things like that. Like, other things get under your skin, but like the dancing has not been one of them. The teaching yoga has not been one of them. Teaching art was not one of them. And so when you were talking about doing the DJing for the first time, like, all I could do was listen, right? Like, I don't know how to support you through this. I don't know what that side is like, but I also couldn't understand. To me, it's like, oh, you just play music. You just like, you make sure it like plays and doesn't stop and whatever, right? Like a layman point of view.
Yeah.
So that first time DJing, why was that so nerve-wracking? And how did you pick your music?
Yeah, well, I think that the nerve-wracking thing, it still continues. It was funny. I woke up from a dream this morning about DJing, and it was like a very typical dream about DJing that I have, which is that I'm supposed to DJ and I get on my computer and the buttons are not working and I can't get to the music, and the music's supposed to play, but it's not. And people are waiting, that kind of dream. Yeah. I choose not to call them nightmares anymore, because I'm like, it's not negative. My brain is just learning. I'm trying to make myself feel better because I have them so frequently.
Whatever you want to say to yourself.
Yeah, I know. Okay. I honestly, it's a strange thing, because most of the time when people talk about DJing, they say what you say, like, what's the big deal? You just play some music. And that's what I used to think before I started DJing. And I have to say, even now, before I sit down to play a set list, I think to myself, what's the big deal? It's just playing some music. It's not a big deal. And then you get into it, and all of a sudden it becomes really serious, and things are like at stake. And the thing,
what's at stake?
What is it? I know, what is it? I'm trying to think of ways to explain it that a non-dancer would understand, and it's kind of like, maybe as a journalist, I might draw a parallel that, that feeling when you want to interview someone and you might say, it's just a conversation with someone, right? You're just going to have a conversation. Mm-hmm. But then you sit down and there's that place in you where you're trying to stay in the conversation, but your brain is like ahead and you're nervous about, maybe I'm not going to ask the right question, or is this the question I should ask? Oh, they said this. And suddenly you're like not present anymore because you're like thinking about all these other things. And they're not rational. It's not like a rational space, but there's like a lot of nervousness that comes over. So it's kind of like that all of a sudden it's not casual, and you think, I'm supposed to hold the attention of these people for 4 hours. My goal is to keep these people on the dance floor for 4 hours or 3 hours, whatever. I need to cater to seasoned dancers who know the music. I need to cater to beginners who don't know the music. I need to cater to the demands of the space, whatever is the energy, like whether it's daytime, nighttime, like to set the mood. And then on top of that, I have to handle the technical aspects of it, of like, not the technology not messing up or not skipping songs or playing things in order, things like that. So there's like all these nuts and bolts that are the details of DJing that can be extremely stressful, because when you're when you're there and you have whatever, whether it's 50 people or 100 people, they're all there and they're all dancing to your music. Like you're the big, like you're the conductor and you have this huge orchestra, right? And it's like if you play the wrong thing, which there are times when you can play the wrong thing. Like that night, this DJ who DJed for the first time, he just didn't know any better. He did the best he could. But I'm a seasoned dancer. I've been around for a long time. I did not have a good experience, but there were a lot of people who did. So that's always also the case. No matter how bad of a DJing job you do, there's always going to be somebody who's going to love it and somebody who's going to hate it, you know? And as a DJ, knowing how finicky dancers are, knowing how finicky I am, you know, maybe even the fact that I am such a picky dancer, I am the one who's like so critical that in my mind, that's the person I'm dealing with. Perhaps I'm trying to like satisfy my own persona, you know, and there's something very tough about it. You know, it's definitely a personal. I can't think of a better word than just like a ritual. Like it's a ritual you have to enter into. It's very psychologically demanding. And then you're there and it's like a marathon, you know, like when you're running for 3 hours and you're trying to get your 21 miles or whatever. You're sitting there glued to the chair for 3 hours and all you do is you're just like making sure that the music is doing what you're expecting it to do. And when you're doing it for the first time, you have no reference point. You're just doing it for the first time. You're doing it based on what you've seen before from other people or whatever conception of DJing you have, but it's your first time. And so when I have most of my DJing playlists from the beginning because I use Spotify, so I save them all. And I have like, at this point, over like 275 playlists or something crazy like that. And when I go back to my playlist from way back and I see what I played, it's like, oh, that's bad. Like I thought it was good, but I listen, I'm like, oh, that I will never play that. I never play that again. If I hear other people play it, it's like terrible. I don't want to dance to it. So I've been there. I did that.
So how do you know that? If it's your first time, right? In order to get to time 200,
yeah,
you have to have the first, second, 10, and so on. So how do you make sure that your first time is okay? And let's just establish, you cannot make everyone happy 100% of the time, all the time. Like it's just not going to happen. And so, and the good and the bad time is probably subjective, you know, says a non-dancer.
Yeah.
But like that first time, should you have, like looking back now, you have the benefit of 200 times. Should you have talked to somebody who's DJ'd before? Should you have talked to dancers who were ahead of you in experience? What homework could you have done to make it different or better?
Yeah, I did. I actually did. I did talk to a lot of dancers. I talked to DJs. When I first started DJing, I was like really hungry for information. And I would come up to DJs during their sets, DJs that I admired, and just ask them. Most of the time I could tell that I only had a limited amount of questions I could ask because they didn't want to be bothered. Or they would give me like very general answers. You know, like if I say, some DJs DJ one song at a time, which is considered to be like the pinnacle of DJing virtuosity, because you must know the music so well that you can recall the name of the song just off the top of your head. And so if I ask the DJ, like, how do you choose the next song? Like, what do you do? And they'll say like, well, I just look at the dancers. I just watch the crowd. And I'm like, okay, what does that mean? What are you looking for? You know? So it was very vague. I wasn't very satisfied with the information I was getting. And I know that that's still the case for most people who start DJing. They just kind of start, you know, they just have some sort of interest in it. And they might have like a nerdiness about them. Like they want to know the music, but most DJs, they just start. They don't really talk about it with anyone because a lot of times people start DJing in small communities where there's not enough concentration So, you know, if somebody wants to start a milonga, they don't know any DJs that are sort of seasoned DJs. So they'll just ask the community and be like, you know, anybody want to start DJing, right? Like, and somebody will step up and they'll start DJing. And with experience, hopefully they stick long enough that they can sort of learn how I did. You know, I kind of learned through just doing it over and over again and having a lot of meltdowns. Just like my first times DJing, every time I DJ'd, I was just like, I couldn't eat. I was hyperventilating. I was having a panic attack. I had to go to the bathroom to like calm myself down. It was really stressful. But nowadays, you know, there are a lot of resources online that people can look at. If you go online and just search, you know, tango DJing, there are DJs who've put out material that sort of explains the basics of DJing. Granted, a lot of it I don't think is to the level that I would want to make it. And I've been teaching DJing now for a couple of years. I've done DJing courses online where I teach people how to do it. So there's more information for it now that I would say, okay, if you're going to DJ, definitely seek out some sort of information about it beforehand. And mainly learning what kind of music is being played most of the time, what's the most popular music, and like knowing what those songs are, like knowing that list of songs that gets played a lot and playing from that first. Like that's the biggest mistake I think that early DJs make. And I made the same mistake. It's completely impossible to escape this mistake, which is to say, oh, I've never heard this song played. This is such a good song. I never hear it played. And then play that song. And I'm like, 9 times out of 10, there's a reason why that song doesn't get played.
But I'm sorry, if you don't dance as much as you do, for instance, how are you supposed to know what are some of the bigger songs that you need to be playing?
Well, that's where some of the groundwork, I think, is important to understand, like the full genre of tango music, the danceable tango music, because 90% of tango that's been written like as a genre of music is not danceable. Like that's a surprise for a lot of people. And of that 90%, there's like a very small percentage that amounts to maybe, I'd say the totality of tango music that we dance adds up to maybe like a couple of thousand songs, like all of the songs that ever get played at a milonga. And of those, only about, I would say 700 to 800 are in very regular rotation. So that list of songs, anywhere in the world you go, you're going to hear those songs everywhere.
Right, but if
my point is,
if I'm just getting into tango, if I'm not you, like how do I find out what those songs are?
Right, and that's the trick. Like you have to know that genre of music. I mean, you can find that out online. You can take classes. You can seek out other people and ask them, to give you a primer. Like I do that. I teach people how to recognize orchestras and figure out how to tell whether music is good or not. But I mean, I just finished a year-long musicality course with a group of people, and it took me a year of work to just impart this information in a way that's not going to just go over their heads and actually implement it in their dance. So it takes a while, and a lot of times new DJs are just doing it because they just love the music, and the attitude is like, I love this music so much, I just want to play it. And they just start. And sometimes that's the best you can do, because otherwise maybe that person would never DJ if they didn't give themselves that permission.
But what if, is there some sort of like I don't know, like a gut check rule that if you love this particular piece of music, check yourself. Maybe that's a beautiful piece of music, but not danceable. So you really need to kind of censor yourself in a way.
Yeah, the censoring, this is what I say typically, is if you have a song that you want to play, you have to test it in multiple ways. First of all, does it sound good? right? The sound, like the recording, and you have a hunch that it might be a good song to dance to. And my process is you got to dance it as a follower and a leader, which a lot of people can't do. But I would say one of the biggest tests is just to dance to the song yourself and feel whether it works or not. And at that point, you can have a pretty good idea whether it's going to work for other people. But again, not a sure thing, because a lot of times the songs that I used to like dancing 10 years ago, I don't like to dance to anymore. So that evolves. But yeah, there is a way to just at least sort of test it in your body. And then, it's got to be combined with an understanding of what's been played for over 100 years now. Like, any DJ who's coming in, they're like coming in on the scene where this music has been played now for over 100 years. And some music that is being played over and over again, it like rises to the top, like imagine a song by Frank Sinatra, New York, right? Like that song, that version of that song. There can be 1,000 covers of that song, but which song are you going to play? Do you play Frank Sinatra or do you play the cover? Like, let's say, to really set the mood. And it's like a lot of times you got to know that Frank Sinatra is the original, is the meat of this song. Like, you've got to play him. And it's the same thing with tango music. It's like there are certain songs, they were recorded, and at the time that they were recorded, they were just like any other tango song. But we've been dancing these songs for so long, and multiple thousands of people have voted for certain songs as being the best. They're so good that we can dance them 100 times and we'll dance them even more, and they don't get old. And those songs have risen to the top, and they create like the canon of what's good music. And to me, it's like this canon is possibly like several hundred songs. If you know this canon, you can play any song from that canon and it will be good because it's been tested and tested and tested, right? And it's sort of counterintuitive, because when you come in as a DJ, you want to be unique. You want to stand out. You want to have your own flavor. That's a very natural desire. So what do? You look at what's been played and saying, oh, that's been played a lot. Let me play something that doesn't get played. And it's like, no, that's the wrong thing. Just join the choir, join the flow of what's been going on for years and years, play that music and just watch how people react. And then once you're like, I think only in the last couple of years have I started to like venture out and experiment more and play songs that people don't hear. And I'm super careful. Like there's a song that I've been sitting on for 5 years that I finally played the last time I DJ'd. And I played it as the last song of the last tanda because I was like that nervous about what it's gonna be. So, that's kind of the mindset that I think is a little bit different, that people don't realize when they're starting to DJ, that it's not about standing out at first. It's actually about fitting in at first. You just want to, because you just want to keep the gears rolling, right? The people are there to dance. They have certain expectations. When I go into a milonga, I have certain expectations as a dancer. I want to hear certain orchestras. There are 4 major orchestras that stand as the main biggest orchestras in tango. D'Arienzo, Di Sarli, Troilo, and Pugliese, these 4 orchestras. And if you were to make a playlist of just those 4 orchestras over and over again, just on repeat, just pick different songs, different periods of their music, and have a whole set just of that, it would work. That's how good that music is, and that's how much it is loved. And that's what I was told, like one of the biggest pieces of advice that actually was, very pivotal for me, is when my friend said that. He's like, if you're going to know the orchestras, you got to know the 4. These are the 4. And if you make a playlist just of these 4 orchestras, it's going to work. And that's the first step. It's like, okay, learn to DJ with those 4 orchestras. then after that, there's like the second tier who are kind of like the runner-ups. And then after that, there's like the third tier. And so there's sort of this, I guess, indoctrination that you go through when you dive into the music, because you kind of have to understand the history of the DJing and the history of how this music was played over the years and how it's being played now. It's very much of an art form, you know. It's a very strange art form, but it definitely, there's a lot less direct sort of like, okay, you do this and then this happens. It's very much like you do need guidance. You do need support, because if you don't, you end up not being a good DJ, and then you don't know why.
The point that you brought up earlier on was like, you know, when you were learning and you approached some DJs and they're like, well, A, they didn't have time for you, and then B, it's just because. Well, that doesn't help anyone, right? Or they really were, you know, very not specific about their feedback or how their brain works or anything. They just kind of give you like, well, this is why I picked this, and this is just, it's because, essentially, right? And so I don't, as an outsider looking in, and here's where you can probably get some flack. I feel like if your art form, if your industry, if you are to survive, you need to produce more DJs, right? You need to get more people interested in this world of yours. And the way to do that is to be more open to teaching, right? So people who are out there who may think they're good, right? Not teaching how you do this does not help the next person after you. You're not going to be able to do this forever, right? Like, how can you grow a community of good DJs who understand the music, who understand why you need to play a certain song at a certain time? How do you do that? And the only way to do that is to be open to conversations and have good, helpful answers that people can take away. I mean, it's true in writing, right? If I've taken pieces of copy or stories to other people, and I've said, can you look at this over for me? I know you're an exceptional writer. Can you make this better? And from some people who are amazing, they give back an edited version to me, but they cannot explain to me why they did that, why they made the changes.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't help me learn.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you want to teach somebody to be better, you have to be able to articulate the why. And if you think about that, it is true for anything. It is true for cooking. It is true for teaching someone how to drive. It is true for, you know, teaching your nephew how to do laundry. Why?
Yeah.
Why we do certain things a certain way. And,
you know, in principle, I totally agree with you. And I think if there was a standardized program for DJ training that can be used to sort of give feedback to DJs, but right now it's so vague. Most of the DJs who DJ, they have their own philosophy, their own sort of way of doing it. And most of them, you know, in tango, when you're talking about tango dance, I've heard somebody say, you can be a great social dancer, you can be a great teacher, or you can be a great performer. You can possibly be two of the three, but you'll never be all three. And when it comes to DJing, you can have, I would say, you can have a great DJ. You might have a great DJ who's also a great dancer. But it's very rare to get a DJ who's also a good teacher, because DJs, I've noticed historically, are not very, they're kind of introverted. You know, they're not people who are going to like take it upon themselves to educate the masses. You know, they don't want to be in the spotlight. And a lot of times they develop their skill of DJing sort of privately. They're not going to have like fundamentals that they will teach. So then what happens is that, let's say I DJ, the feedback, if I want feedback, it's kind of tricky because a lot of times I'm like, who do I trust to give me feedback? Whose style of DJing do I agree with or respect so much? Whose opinion I'm going to respect so much that it's going to be helpful to me to ask them for the feedback. And a lot of times people are not very honest with feedback either because there's this lack of experience of just giving feedback in general. Like giving feedback is just not something that tango dancers are very proficient at. Where like whether it's feedback about dancing, I have to have conversations about that, like how to give feedback during dancing versus DJing. So, and also realize that tango is not like a typical market. DJs don't start DJing for money. It's not like a money making endeavor. There's like, it's a labor of love for sure.
100%. But that's not like, to me, but I'm square that way, right? It doesn't matter if I'm doing something for money or I'm doing it for free to help somebody out. Like the level of output and passion and commitment to doing it right is going to be the same. But
that's me and you, and that's a personality type.
I know, it's exhausting. It's exhausting to be us. I know.
So, yeah.
But even still, why do you DJ, right? If you're not doing it for money, you're not going to be famous doing it, right? You're doing it for what reason? To watch people have a good time. And so if you're watching people not have a good time,
that's the thing. I can't say that people didn't have a good time that night. I had a good time despite the music. I'll say that. But there are people who had a great time, and that's the case with all DJs. I mean, I remember, I think last year I attended a DJ set that was like appalling to me. I couldn't imagine that this person was even allowed to DJ. I was like, I could have done a better job sleepwalking and just playing random songs on Spotify. Like that's how bad it was. And I heard people running up to him afterwards saying, "Oh my God, I loved your music. It was so amazing." So it makes it really tricky. That's why I'm very aware that whatever I say, there can be somebody else who might criticize me and say that they don't like my music. That's like totally possible. And I think that's what makes it it makes me kind of uncomfortable to even talk about it because it's so, it's not standardized.
But that's why.
I know.
Right. But that is why we talk about it. That's why you should talk about it. All the things that you're uncomfortable about and all the things that make tango special. Like nothing is standardized. Like I don't understand why y'all's feet go a certain way. Like I don't get that. I don't understand why the eyes are closed. I don't know why the hand is out there. I don't know the order of any of that. None of it makes sense to me.
I get it.
In a way that I can turn on my car and drive or turn on a vacuum cleaner. I know I'm like sounding really super sexy right now, but none of it makes sense. But I think, again, from really outsider, and people are like, "Oh, what does she know?" Unless you guys talk about this in communities openly and continue having these conversations, I'm not suggesting that this art form of yours can be standardized, right? One of the many beautiful things about it is it is not a standard. It is like this evolving and yet stagnant and yet changing thing over this hundreds of years that the music has been played and the dance has been danced. But you gotta talk about it. You gotta talk about the music you get.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing. That's exactly what you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm doing it. There's a lot of conversation going on Facebook. Facebook is kind of like the hub for a lot of these topics. There's a lot of chats. There's DJing groups specifically. There's DJing chats where people are discussing these things. I think my own critique of everything that's going on is just like there's a lot of noise, right? It's somebody who is starting to DJ. It's very unclear who to listen to. The best you can do is connect with a DJ that you admire, and a lot of, I've heard people say that they get mentored by certain DJs. And that's a good strategy. I think that's probably the best you can do, especially if you're in a small community. But the difficulty of sort of a decentralized activity like tango. There's no codification. There's no curriculum, or there's not even a standard curriculum for tango itself, right? Like every teacher you go to is going to give you something different. The difficulty of that is, profound when you're thinking about quality and wanting to bring up the quality across the board. But also, tango is very resistant to being codified or centralized, because tango is full of people who are extremely individual and they don't want to follow the crowd. It's like herding cats, it's like everybody has their own opinion. And especially when it comes to male DJs, I think more than female DJs, male DJs have a lot of ego. I mean, tango dancers in general have more ego, I think, but male dancers, male DJs have a lot of ego. They have a lot of opinion, and it's not very open for discussion. Like, it's not like I have the room to go and say to this DJ that night, be like, you know what, your DJing could be better. And maybe, I've thought about other ways, like anonymous ways that feedback could be submitted, or people could, talk about the music. But the problem is that most of the time people don't really know the music well enough. 80% of people on the dance floor are not going to know the difference. And that's why it still works, right? That night, even though I didn't like the music, a lot of people did, and a lot of people had a good time, and they're going to have a good memory of it. And in their eyes, he's a good DJ. And so I can't rush in and be like, no, you can't like him because he's not a good DJ. No, here's why. No. But there definitely needs to be more musical understanding among the dancers in general, for it to make some sort of sense.
So I think a final thought from me, and I think we've come full circle. I want to believe, and then my final thought is this: when I asked you in the beginning, how do you pick music, or what is the best music? I think the answer to that, again, from an outsider who does not dance, is you pick the music based on what someone of your level would enjoy. Because the people who are starting out, they're going to enjoy anything, right? No matter what. They're dilettantes. They're just starting out, they're trying to remember where the foot goes, right? And not to run into somebody on the dance floor. They have other issues. So they, like the crowd, would have a good time no matter what. Your goal, your target audience when you're DJing has to be the advanced, professionally dancing crowd. Because if you please them, then that means you've done a good job.
It's a very common advice, actually. One of the pieces of advice that I got.
So I'm not original?
Early on. I'm sorry, you're not original. You're original in many, many ways, though.
That's it. Damn it,
yeah, to play to the advanced dancer, because if they're on the dance floor, then everybody else will be dancing. That's a lot of times the advice.
Okay. I can't fix y'all. I can't help you. All I'm saying is I hope you publish this and accept all the hate and all the love that's going to come from this conversation.
Well, I appreciate you drilling me, because this is, I think, the first time that I've been interviewed on my own podcast.